captured alien girl used as monster bait until a lowly miner accidentally saved her life. The mining scanner in my hand pulsed with a faint red glow as I moved deeper into the unmapped cavern. 5 years working extraction on Crystallis Moon had taught me to trust my instincts over equipment. And something felt off about this section. The readouts showed unusual energy signatures that didn't match any known crystal formation. Worth investigating, especially since I'd already ventured farther than my scheduled survey route. I switched off my helmet lamp and paused, letting my eyes adjust to the natural bioluminescence that lit the cavern walls with ghostly blues and purples. The silence was complete, too complete for comfort. Even the constant drip of mineral water that usually sounded through these tunnels had gone quiet. That's when I saw her. At first I thought she was part of the massive azure crystal formation, her skin reflecting the same iridescent quality. But then I registered the restraints binding her wrists and ankles to the crystal surface. Her skin pulsed weakly with internal light, not a crystal at all but a living being. A Lumidian woman, if the scattered intelligence briefings I'd received were accurate. And she was being used as bait. The shadow leaper circling the area confirmed my suspicion. The predator moved with practiced patience, its semi-transparent body rippling as it stalked around the crystal formation. Poachers. They'd set a trap using the most valuable bait possible. A living Lumidian. The shadow leaper would be drawn to her energy signature, and once it closed in, the poachers would capture both. 2 rare specimens for the black market. I needed to act quickly. The woman's dim bioluminescence suggested she was weakening, and I didn't want to consider what would happen when the shadow leaper eventually lost patience. I silently positioned my industrial extractor, a tool designed for precision crystal removal that could also deliver a concentrated sonic blast. Timing my shot with the creature's movement, I calculated the angle and fired. The blast hit perfectly, scattering energy across the cavern and temporarily dispersing the shadow leaper's body. It shrieked in confusion, retreating into a dark crevice. The Lumidian woman's eyes snapped open. When she spotted me approaching, her eyes widened in terror. She pulled against her restraints, her skin flashing with panicked pulses of light. I holstered my extractor and raised my empty hands. "I'm not with them," I said, knowing she probably couldn't understand me. "I'm going to get you out of here." Moving slowly, I approached the crystal formation. The restraints were sophisticated, energy-dampening cuffs that explained her weakened state. I pulled out my utility knife and began working on the locking mechanism. Her breathing quickened as I worked on the first restraint. I kept my movements deliberate and non-threatening, maintaining eye contact whenever possible. "Axel Reed," I said, pointing to myself. "I'm not going to hurt you." The first restraint clicked open, and her wrist fell free. Instead of attacking me as I half expected, she simply rubbed the marked skin where the cuff had been. I moved to the second restraint, then the ones at her ankles. As the final cuff fell away, a low threatening hiss spread through the cavern. The shadow leaper had returned, its body more solid and aggressive than before. It crouched at the edge of the crystal formation, preparing to pounce. I shoved the Lumidian woman behind me, drawing my flare gun in one smooth motion. The creature launched itself toward us just as I fired. The bright red flare exploded against the cavern ceiling, showering the area with intense light. The shadow leaper screeched and recoiled from the sudden brightness, thrashing violently against the crystal formations. "Run!" I shouted, grabbing the woman's arm and pulling her toward the tunnel entrance. I didn't know if she understood the word, but my meaning was clear enough. We sprinted across the cavern floor, my helmet lamp bouncing wildly. Behind us, the shadow leaper's thrashing intensified, slamming against the crystal pillars supporting the cavern. A deep rumble vibrated through the ground. I glanced back to see cracks spreading across the cavern ceiling. "Faster," I urged, practically dragging the woman as we raced for the exit tunnel. We were 20 meters from safety when the first chunk of ceiling crashed down. More followed in a cascade of rock and crystal. I pushed forward desperately, but the avalanche of debris moved faster, completely sealing the tunnel entrance before we could reach it. The dust cloud engulfed us, and I pulled my breathing filter over my mouth, wishing I had a spare for the woman. When the air finally cleared enough to see, the reality of our situation became painfully apparent. We were trapped. The Shadow Leaper had disappeared, likely escaped through some hidden passage or crushed under the collapse. Small mercy at least. I turned to my unexpected companion, who stood trembling slightly in the eerie bioluminescent glow of the cavern. Up close, I could see straight-line patterns etched across her temples and hands. She was tall and gracefully built, with what appeared to be fine silver filaments instead of hair, floating slightly as if underwater. "Are you hurt?" I asked, miming checking for injuries. She hesitated, then responded in a musical language that my universal translator couldn't fully process. From her wrist, she activated a small device that flickered with light as it attempted to translate. "Not injury." The device struggled to convert her words. "Captive. Long time." I nodded, relieved we had some means of communication, however imperfect. "How long were you held here?" I asked slowly, giving her device time to process. She held up her hands, fingers spread twice and then once more. 29 cycles, the translator managed. "Nearly a month," I muttered, anger rising at what she must have endured. I pushed the emotion down. Anger wouldn't help our current predicament. "I'm Axel Reed. I run an extraction team on this moon." The word extraction made her visibly recoil, her skin darkening with what I assumed was fear or distrust. "You take crystals," her translator produced, "like others, who take me." I shook my head firmly. "No, my team extracts minerals legally. We don't traffic in rare species or harm sentient beings. I'm not with the poachers who captured you." She studied my face intently, seemingly trying to determine if I could be trusted. Finally, she placed a hand on her chest. "Nyria," she said, the word clear without translation. "Nyria Valen. We need to find another way out." "Nyria," I said, pulling out my mapping device. The screen flickered, damaged from the cave-in or interference from the dense crystal formations. "My equipment isn't working well down here." Nyria closed her eyes, her bioluminescent skin beginning to pulse in rhythmic waves. The patterns spread from her core outward. She turned slowly, her hands extended slightly away from her body. I watched fascinated, as the pulses of light changed pattern and intensity depending on which direction she faced. After nearly a minute, she opened her eyes, and pointed decisively toward a narrow fissure in the cavern wall, an opening my equipment hadn't registered at all. "Energy path," her translator provided. "Safe way." "I feel it." I studied the crack skeptically. It seemed barely wide enough to squeeze through, and led deeper into the moon rather than toward the surface. But with our original exit blocked and my equipment compromised, her senses were our best option. "You're sure?" I asked. Nyria nodded, her eyes reflecting the blue glow of the surrounding crystals. "No choice. Trust me, or stay." She was right. We had no choice but to rely on each other now. I checked my equipment belt, confirmed my water flask was full, and nodded toward the narrow passage. "After you," I said, gesturing for her to lead the way. Nyria moved toward the fissure with surprising confidence, her slender body slipping easily into the narrow opening. I took one last look at the collapsed tunnel behind us, drew a deep breath, and followed her into the unknown depths of Crystallis Moon. The narrow fissure squeezed around us. The rough stones scraped against my shoulders as I inched forward behind Nyria. Her bioluminescent skin provided the only reliable light source, showing the jagged walls. My helmet lamp had begun to flicker. The battery would need replacing soon. "How much farther through this part?" I asked, my voice bouncing in the confined space. Nyria paused ahead of me. Her translator device flickered as it processed my words. "Opening soon," she replied, her musical voice distorted by the device. "Feel air change." I couldn't feel any difference in the air, but I'd already witnessed how her senses operated on a different level than mine. 3 hours of following her through these winding tunnels had taught me to trust her instincts over my faltering equipment. The passage widened slightly, allowing me to straighten my hunched shoulders. Strange fungi clung to the ceiling, giving off a soft blue glow that matched Nyria's natural light. I'd seen bioluminescent plants throughout Crystallis Moon, but these had an unusual pattern, pulsing with light. "These alive?" I asked, pointing upward. Nyria looked where I pointed. "Yes, they connect. One organism, many bodies, like my people's bond." Her translator was definitely improving, producing more coherent sentences the longer we traveled. "Your people are connected?" I asked, ducking beneath a low-hanging cluster of crystal. "Energy bonds. We feel each other. Not thoughts but presence." Her slender fingers traced the air. "Hard to explain in your language." We continued through a series of wider tunnels, where crystal formations jutted from the walls. Nyria moved with surprising confidence, occasionally pausing to close her eyes and orient herself, her skin pulsing with soft waves of light when she did. The sound of trickling water grew louder as we rounded a corner. A small spring bubbled from a crack in the wall, forming a clear pool in a natural basin before disappearing into another fissure. "We should rest," I suggested, kneeling beside the water. I tested it with my portable analyzer. Clean enough to drink and hydrate. Nyria nodded, sitting down beside the pool. I noticed she moved with increasing difficulty. Whatever they'd done to her in captivity had clearly taken a toll. I pulled a ration bar from my utility belt and broke it in half, offering a portion to her. Not exactly gourmet, but its calories. She accepted it with a curious tilt of her head. "Thank you." I watched as she examined the bar before taking a tentative bite. Her face contorted in what I assumed was disgust, but she continued eating. "Sorry. It's all I've got on me," I said, finishing my half without reacting to the chalky taste. "My people rarely need food like this," she explained between careful bites. "We absorb energy from crystals. You mentioned the Shadow Leaper was drawn to your energy signature. Is that related?" Nyria nodded, her eyes reflecting the bioluminescent glow around us. "Predators sense our energy, hunt us for it." She gestured to the crystal formations surrounding us. "These hold energy patterns. We connect to them, draw strength. Like a battery charging," I suggested. Her translator paused, searching for equivalents. "Yes, but more natural. Symbiotic." A distant rumble interrupted our conversation. Small pebbles skittered down from the ceiling as the vibration intensified. "That's not good," I muttered, scrambling to my feet. "We need to move." Nyria rose quickly, but the rumbling increased, becoming a thunderous roar. The tunnel shook violently. A large crack splintered across the ceiling, and chunks of rock began to fall. "Run," I shouted, grabbing my pack. We sprinted away from the spring as the ceiling continued to fracture. A massive section collapsed behind us, sending a cloud of dust billowing through the tunnel. Ahead, the passage split in two. Without hesitation, Nyria veered right. I followed with the sound of falling rock behind us. A particularly violent tremor knocked Nyria off balance. She stumbled toward a jagged crystal formation protruding from the wall. I lunged forward, wrapping an arm around her waist and pulling her against me, away from the danger. The moment my arm enclosed her, Nyria's skin flared with intense light, illuminating the entire tunnel in bright blue-purple. The sudden brightness was startling, but not as startling as the electrical tingle that shot through my body at the contact. We froze for a split second, both seemingly shocked by the reaction. Her wide, shimmering eyes locked with mine. Another crash from behind broke the moment. I released her and we pressed on, diving through a low opening. Just as the tunnel behind us completely collapsed, we landed hard in darkness and silence, the dust settling around us. "You okay?" I asked between coughs, fumbling for my lamp. "Yes," she replied, her voice soft. Her skin had dimmed to a faint glow, barely illuminating her face. "You saved me." "Instinct," I said, brushing dust from my clothes. "But that light show when I touched you, what was that?" "Surprise," energy response. Her skin pulsed slightly brighter with what I interpreted as embarrassment, not common. As the dust settled, my eyes adjusted to our surroundings, and I slowly realized we'd stumbled into something extraordinary. My faltering lamp wasn't necessary anymore. The chamber we'd fallen into was massive, at least 30 meters across, and filled with crystal formations unlike any I'd ever seen. They rose from floor to ceiling in twisted columns, branching patterns that looked like jagged lines, each one glowing with an internal light that changed colors slowly across the spectrum. Incredible, I whispered, turning in a slow circle. In 5 years of mining, I've never seen anything like this. Nyria stood in the center of the chamber, her eyes wide with wonder. Ancient growth chamber. Very old, very powerful. She approached one of the largest formations, a spiraling column that pulsed with blue-green light. Slowly, carefully, she placed her palm against its surface. The effect was immediate and stunning. Energy visibly flowed from the crystal into her body, racing along the circuit-like patterns on her skin. Her entire body brightened until she almost hurt to look at, the silver filaments of her hair lifting slightly as if charged with static. When she finally stepped back from the crystal, she looked completely transformed. The weariness that had dragged at her movements was gone. She stood taller, her eyes brighter, her movements more fluid. "You look better," I observed. "That crystal was like medicine for you." "Energy renewal," she corrected. "Long captivity drained me." She approached me slowly, extending her hand. "I can share, if you trust." I hesitated, remembering the jolt I'd felt when I grabbed her earlier, but exhaustion weighed heavily on me. After hours of tense navigation through the tunnels, "Will it hurt?" I asked, eyeing her outstretched hand. "No, warm, strength." She waited patiently, palm up. I placed my hand in hers. Immediately the tingling sensation returned, but controlled this time, a gentle current of warmth that spread up my arm and throughout my body. My fatigue disappeared, and I felt alert and energetic in a way I hadn't in years. My skin seemed to vibrate slightly, every sense heightened. When she released my hand, I flexed my fingers in amazement. "That's quite something." Nyria's skin pulsed with soft waves of light. Connection, energy path between us. The intimate moment ended abruptly as my scanner emitted a shrill beep. I pulled it from my belt, checking the damaged display. "Movement," I said, instantly alert. "Multiple signatures about 200 meters back." "Poachers," Nyria whispered, fear darkening her luminescence. "Looking for me. How do they know you're still down here?" "Tracker." She brushed her fingers along her neck, showing me a small, nearly invisible scar, implanted when captured. Not working well in crystal fields, but still dangerous. We needed to move. I studied my mapping device, but the screen flickered uselessly, overwhelmed by the intense crystal energy surrounding us. "Which way?" I asked. Nyria closed her eyes, her skin pulsing in that now recognizable pattern as she sensed the energy flows. After a moment, she pointed toward a low archway on the far side of the chamber. "Strong currents will mask our trail." We hurried through the archway into another series of tunnels, these narrower and more winding than before. The ambient crystal light faded the further we went, forcing us to rely more on Nyria's bioluminescence for visibility. My equipment continued to malfunction, leaving us completely dependent on her abilities to navigate. "How are they tracking you so persistently?" I asked, as we paused at an intersection of 3 tunnels. Nyria's expression darkened. "Not random capture. I was targeted." "What do you mean targeted?" She hesitated, then gestured for silence, her head tilting as she listened. I strained my ears but heard nothing. Still, I trusted her senses. We quickly ducked into a small alcove, pressing ourselves against the wall as her skin dimmed to nearly darkness. We stood in silence, barely breathing. Minutes passed before I heard what she had detected. Faint voices and the clatter of equipment moving through the tunnels we'd left behind. "They're persistent," I whispered when the sounds had faded. "I am valuable," she replied, softly. Not just any Lumidian. They knew who I was when they took me. And who are you exactly? She didn't answer immediately, instead peering out to ensure the coast was clear. Important to my people. That is all I can say now. We continued through the tunnels, moving as quietly as possible. After another hour of tense navigation, we found a defensible position, a small cavern with only one entrance, which would give us warning if anyone approached. We should rest, I suggested. Recover our strength before continuing. Nyria nodded, lowering herself to sit against the wall. I settled beside her, close enough to talk quietly, but maintaining a respectful distance. Why did you risk yourself for me? She asked, after a long silence. In Crystal Chamber, you could have been hurt. I considered my answer carefully. I've seen too many people get hurt when I could have done something. You have lost someone, she observed, her voice gentle. The memories surfaced unwillingly. The mining disaster 3 years ago. The evacuation I'd led that went catastrophically wrong. 4 good people dead because I'd misjudged the stability of a tunnel. We had a Category 5 crystal surge, I said, the words coming out rough. I was responsible for evacuating the East Quadrant. Made a call to use the maintenance tunnels as a shortcut. They collapsed. I stared at my hands. 4 of my crew didn't make it out. Nyria was silent for a moment. You carry their weight still. Every day, I admitted. It's why I'm careful now, why I follow protocols, why I check everything twice. I looked at her glowing figure in the darkness. But when I saw you trapped back there, protocols didn't matter. Someone needed help. Compassion, her translator provided. Rare quality in dangerous places. Maybe, I said. Or just trying to make things right. We sat in comfortable silence for a while. The soft pulse of her bioluminescence, creating moving patterns across the cavern walls. Why were you on Crystallis Moon? I finally asked. If you're so important to your people, this seems like a dangerous place to be. Research, she replied. Crystal energy patterns. Important to Lumidian future. She hesitated. Not supposed to be alone. Others were not as fortunate when poachers came. The implication was clear. She'd survived while others hadn't. Another kind of survivor's guilt I recognized all too well. We should try to sleep, I suggested, checking my chronometer. Take shifts watching the entrance. I'll go first. Nyria nodded, curling slightly against the wall. Her luminescence dimmed further, though never completely dark. Axel, she said softly, as she settled. Thank you for finding me. Get some rest, Nyria, I replied, positioning myself to watch the tunnel entrance. We've still got a long way to go. As she drifted into sleep, her light pulsing in gentle rhythmic waves, I found myself studying her face. Whatever she was hiding about her identity, whatever had brought her to this dangerous moon, one thing was certain. I was now as committed to getting her to safety as I was to my own survival. Something about her had affected me in a way no one had in years. I turned my attention back to the dark tunnel, listening for any sign of pursuit, one hand resting on my extractor, ready for whatever might come next. The final stretch of tunnel narrowed until we had to crawl through a passage barely wide enough for my shoulders. Loose rocks dug into my palms and knees as I followed Nyria's dim glow ahead of me. 18 hours underground had left us exhausted, our water supplies depleted, and my body covered in scrapes and bruises. Are you sure this is the right way? I asked, my voice hoarse from the dust. Nyria paused, her light pulsing faintly as she sensed the energy currents. Yes. Feel the air changing. Surface close. She was right. A small change in the air currents brought the faint scent of moss and mineral dust, different from the old musty air of the deep tunnels. I switched on my damaged helmet lamp one last time, its weak beam revealing a vertical crack in the stone ahead. There, Nyria said, pointing toward the fissure. Light comes through. We scrambled toward it, hope giving us renewed energy. I reached the crack first, pressing my face against it to peer outside. A sliver of Crystallis Moon's perpetual twilight sky was visible through the opening. We made it, I said, unable to hide the relief in my voice. Now we just need to widen this enough to squeeze through. I pulled out my utility tool and began working at the edges of the crack, chipping away at the softer stone. After several minutes of effort, the opening was just wide enough for Nyria's slender frame to fit through. You first, I told her, wiping sweat from my forehead. I'll follow. Nyria hesitated, her skin darkening slightly. What if your people reject me, attack me? They won't, I assured her, though I couldn't be entirely certain. They're my crew. They'll listen to me. She nodded and carefully maneuvered through the opening. I heard her soft gasp as she emerged into the open air. I widened the crack a bit more before following, scraping my shoulders painfully as I squeezed through. The usual twilight of Crystallis Moon greeted me. The gas giant it orbited, blocking most of the system's star, creating a permanent dusk that painted the landscape in blues and purples. After so long underground, even this dim light seemed painfully bright. We stood on a rocky outcropping about half a kilometer from Outpost Vega. The industrial compound sat between massive crystal formations, its utilitarian structures a stark contrast to the natural beauty surrounding it. Floodlights illuminated the perimeter fence, and I could make out the silhouettes of the extraction equipment against the skyline. That's it, I said, pointing. Outpost Vega. Home for now. Nyria studied the compound, her eyes reflecting the distant lights. Many machines, much electricity. Will that be a problem for you? I asked, remembering how she'd reacted to some of the energy fields underground. I will manage, she replied, though her skin dimmed slightly, just uncomfortable. We made our way down the slope toward the compound, following a worn path that curved between towering crystal formations. Movement caught my eye near the perimeter. Security cameras tracking our approach, their red indicator lights blinking as they registered our presence. They've spotted us, I said. Standard protocol, no need to worry. As we neared the main gate, the external speakers crackled to life. Identify yourself, came Dom's gruff voice. It's Reed, I called back. Open up, Dom. A pause, then, who's with you? I glanced at Nyria, whose luminescence had dimmed to almost nothing, likely an instinctive response to potential danger. A guest, I replied. I'll explain inside. Now, open the damn gate, before I override it myself. Another pause, longer this time, before the gate slowly slid open with a mechanical groan. Dom stood just inside, flanked by two other crew members, all holding mining tools that could double as weapons in a pinch. Easy, I said, raising my hands slightly. She's not a threat. Dom's eyes narrowed as he took in Nyria's alien appearance. Even with her luminescence dimmed, her otherworldly features were unmistakable. What the hell, Reed? He demanded. You disappear for nearly a day, and show up with a Lumidian. Are you out of your mind? She needed help, I said firmly. Poachers had her trapped in the western caverns. Dom's expression darkened. Poachers? Here, Christ, Reed. That's not our problem. You know the protocols. I'm making it our problem, I countered, stepping slightly in front of Nyria. She saved my life down there. I wouldn't have made it back without her. We stared each other down for a long moment. Dom and I had worked together for 3 years, not friends exactly, but with a professional respect that had been tested more than once. He finally grunted, and lowered his makeshift weapon. Fine. Get inside, both of you. But this isn't over. The other crew members followed his lead, though their expressions remained suspicious. We passed through the gate, and into the compound's main yard, where the remaining crew had gathered, drawn by the commotion. Nyria stayed close to me as we walked, her eyes looking at everything with curiosity and wariness. I could feel the subtle vibration of her anxiety through the air next to me, something I wouldn't have noticed before spending so much time with her underground. Everyone to the common area, I announced. I'll explain everything once. The common area was the largest enclosed space in the outpost, a no-frills room with metal tables, mismatched chairs and a small kitchen area in one corner. The walls were lined with safety notices and production schedules, harsh overhead lighting, cast everything in an unflattering glare. My crew filed in, 12 men and women, their faces showing varying degrees of suspicion, curiosity, and outright hostility. They sat or stood in a rough semicircle, all eyes fixed on Nyria. "This is Nyria Valen," I began, gesturing to her. "I found her being held captive by poachers in the western tunnels. She helped me navigate back to the surface after a cave-in blocked our original exit." Poachers. Rima Chen, our tech specialist, leaned forward, her round glasses reflecting the light. "What were they after?" "Crystal formations, rare specimens," I said, deliberately vague. I didn't want to cause panic by explaining they were specifically after Nyria herself. They had set up an illegal operation about 20 kilometers west of our boundary, and you just happened to find her. Dom asked skeptically, arms crossed over his chest. "I was following unusual energy readings," I explained. "They turned out to be coming from her." This drew murmurs from the crew. Nyria stood quietly beside me, her translator device occasionally flickering as it processed the conversation. "Can she understand us?" asked Javier, one of the younger extraction specialists. "Yes." Nyria spoke for the first time. "I understand. My device translates." Her voice was musical even through the mechanical filter of the translator. Dom stepped forward, his stocky frame tense. "Look, Reed, I respect your judgment, but bringing an alien into our outpost violates at least 3 corporate protocols. We don't know anything about her, or what she might be capable of." "I am not dangerous," Nyria said, before I could respond. "I only wish to rest, then return to my people." "And how exactly do you plan to do that?" Dom challenged. "Call them on our comm system. Use our resources." "That's enough, Dom," I said firmly. "She stays until we figure out a safe way to get her back to her people." "That's final." The tension in the room was palpable. I scanned the faces of my crew, noting who seemed sympathetic and who shared Dom's suspicion. Rima looked more curious than anything, while some of the others were clearly uncomfortable with the situation. "She'll stay in the research lab," I decided aloud. "It's isolated from most of our electrical systems and has its own environmental controls." "The lab, with all our data," Dom protested. "With all our outdated equipment nobody uses," I corrected him. "The real data is backed up on the central server. You know that." Dom threw up his hands in frustration but didn't argue further. The others began to disperse, still eyeing Nyria with varying degrees of mistrust. "Rima," I called, "can you show Nyria to the lab and make sure she has whatever she needs?" Rima nodded eagerly, her initial wariness apparently overcome by scientific curiosity. "Of course. This way, please," she said to Nyria, gesturing toward the corridor. Nyria looked at me questioningly. "It's okay," I assured her. "Rima will help you get settled. I need to debrief the rest of the crew." She nodded and followed Rima, her slender body seeming even more alien amid the industrial harshness of the outpost. As soon as they were gone, Dom rounded on me. "Have you lost your mind, Reed? You know what corporate policy says about unregistered aliens on company property." "I know what it says about humanitarian assistance too," I countered. "She was being held against her will. What was I supposed to do? Leave her there?" "You could have called for a proper extraction team," Dom insisted. "Let Galactic Security handle it." "There wasn't time," I said, leaning against the table. "And you know how long it takes security to respond out here. She would have been gone before they arrived." Dom stared at me for a long moment. "There's something you're not telling us." I met his gaze steadily. "Nothing that affects the safety of this outpost or this crew." "That's not your call to make," he said. But there was less heat in his voice now. "Just keep her contained until we can arrange transport off-world." I nodded, though I had no intention of treating Nyria like a prisoner. "Get some rest, Dom. I'll take first watch tonight," he grunted in acknowledgement before walking away, leaving me alone in the common area. I sank into a chair, the exhaustion of the past 18 hours finally catching up with me. After a quick shower and change of clothes in my quarters, I headed to the research lab to check on Nyria. I found her sitting on a makeshift bed Rima had arranged, surrounded by various pieces of obsolete equipment. The lab was one of the oldest sections of the outpost, rarely used since we'd updated our analysis procedures. "How are you settling in?" I asked, leaning against the doorframe. Nyria looked up, her skin brightening slightly at my presence. "It is acceptable. Fewer energy fields than other areas. I figured you'd be more comfortable here," I said. "Sorry about the reception. They'll come around." "Your second-in-command does not trust me," she observed. "Dom doesn't trust anyone at first," I replied with a small smile. "It's why he's good at his job. Nothing personal." Nyria nodded, then gestured to a small device Rima had apparently left with her. "Your technician is interesting. Many questions." "That's Rima," I said with a chuckle. "She's probably never met a Lumidian before. None of us have, really. She asked to study my biological readings," Nyria said, a hint of amusement in her voice. "I agreed to limited scans." I raised an eyebrow. "That's unusually accommodating of you. Your crew rescued me too. By extension," she said simply. "I owe courtesy." We fell into comfortable silence. I noticed she had arranged some of the small crystals Rima must have provided in a precise pattern on the table beside her bed. "Will you be able to rest here?" I asked. "I know it's not ideal." "Yes," she assured me. "Though your world's energy patterns are chaotic, different from home." I was about to respond when the outpost's emergency alarm blared throughout the compound. The harsh sound rang through the metal walls, accompanied by flashing red warning lights. "What's happening?" Nyria asked, her skin pulsing rapidly with alarm. I was already moving toward the door. "Stay here," I ordered. "I need to check this." Racing through the corridors, I reached the central monitoring station where several crew members had gathered. Warning messages flashed across the main screen. "Primary extractor overload," Rima reported tersely. "Energy readings are spiking beyond capacity." "How bad?" I demanded. "Category 4 and climbing," she replied, her fingers flying over the control panel. "The coolant system isn't responding." Dom appeared at my side. "We need to shut it down manually. If that thing blows, it'll take half the outpost with it." I nodded. "Initiate emergency protocol 7. Get everyone to safety positions." As the crew scrambled to follow orders, I headed for the extraction bay, Dom and Rima right behind me. The massive primary extractor dominated the center of the bay, a complex machine designed to safely draw energy from the crystal formations and convert it to usable power. Now it buzzed ominously, vibrating with excess energy that made the air around it shimmer. "What triggered this?" I asked, as Rima accessed the control terminal. "Unknown," she replied, looking concerned at the readings. "It's like something interrupted the normal flow pattern. The energy is building up instead of spreading out." Dom was already at the manual override, attempting to engage the emergency shutdown. "It's not responding." I joined him, both of us struggling with the mechanical lever that should have cut power to the main systems. It refused to budge. "The energy surge must have fused the internal mechanisms," Rima called out, her voice rising with panic. "We're approaching critical levels." The machine's buzz had become a high-pitched whine. Arcs of blue-white energy crackled across its surface. The air in the room felt charged, raising the hair on my arms. "Everyone out," I ordered. "Clear the bay now." The crew began to retreat, but I knew we were running out of time. If the extractor exploded, the chain reaction could destroy the entire outpost. We needed minutes. We didn't have to evacuate everyone. "Axel," Nyria's voice cut through the chaos. She stood in the doorway, her eyes wide as she took in the situation. "I told you to stay in the lab," I shouted over the whine of the machine. "I can help," she insisted, moving toward the extractor despite my protests. "No, it's not safe." I moved to intercept her, but she was quicker, slipping past me toward the malfunctioning machine. "Nyria, don't." I lunged for her arm, but she had already reached the extractor. Without hesitation, she placed both hands directly on the machine's main housing. The effect was immediate and stunning. Her skin ignited with brilliant light, pulsing from her hands up through her arms and across her entire body. The circuit-like patterns on her skin glowed with intense blue-white energy. The extractor's whine began to diminish as Nyria stood rigid, her body trembling with the effort of whatever she was doing. Energy visibly coursed from the machine into her body, following the patterns on her skin. "What the hell?" Dom muttered beside me. Rima stared at her readings. She's redirecting the energy surge, channeling it through herself somehow. We watched in amazement as Nyria turned slowly, still connected to the extractor, and extended one hand toward a large crystal formation that grew from the wall of the bay. As her fingers touched the crystal, the energy flowed from her body into the formation, which began to glow with the same intense light. For nearly a minute, she maintained this connection, a living conduit between the dangerous energy buildup and the natural crystal that could safely absorb it. The extractor's warnings gradually silenced, the emergency lights dimming as the crisis passed. When the machine finally returned to its normal operational state, Nyria released her hold, staggering backward. I rushed to catch her before she fell, supporting her weight as her luminescence dimmed to a soft glow. "Are you all right?" I asked urgently. She nodded weakly. "Energy too much, too fast." "What did you just do?" Dom demanded, approaching cautiously. "Energy redirection," she explained, her voice faint. "Natural ability, saw the danger, had to act." Rima was already examining the readings on her portable scanner. "It's stable now, all readings normal." She completely neutralized the surge. The rest of the crew stood in stunned silence, staring at Nyria with new eyes. What had been fear and suspicion was rapidly changing into something like awe. Dom stepped forward, his expression unreadable. "You saved us all," he said, gruffly. "That explosion would have killed at least half the crew." Nyria straightened, regaining some of her strength. "Your technology, not compatible with crystal energy patterns, creates dangerous imbalances." "She's right," Rima interjected excitedly. "Our extraction methods are efficient, but not aligned with the natural energy flows. That's why we get these occasional surges." Dom was quiet for a moment, then extended his hand toward Nyria. "I owe you an apology," he said. "I misjudged you." Nyria hesitated briefly before taking his hand. "Caution is wise with strangers." No apology needed. The tension in the room dissolved as the crew began to approach, no longer afraid but curious and grateful. Rima could barely contain her excitement, already firing questions about Nyria's abilities and how they might be applied to improve their extraction methods. I watched as Nyria answered their questions with patient dignity, her initial wariness gradually fading as she was accepted into the group. The change was remarkable, from unwelcome alien to respected savior in a matter of minutes. Hours later, after the excitement had died down and the necessary reports had been filed, I found Nyria in the monitoring room. She stood before the large viewport, looking out at the crystal fields that surrounded the outpost. The twilight landscape cast her profile in soft shadow. "How are you feeling?" I asked, joining her at the viewport. "Better," she replied. "The energy has settled within me." "What you did was incredible," I said, "and very brave." She turned to face me. "Your people have been kind. They recognize courage when they see it," I said. "Dom's actually been speaking highly of you. I didn't think that was possible." A small smile played across her face. "He is protective of this place, of you all." "I understand this." We stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching as the distant crystals caught and reflected the meager light. "I need to return to my people soon," she said finally, her voice soft. "They will be searching for me." The statement shouldn't have bothered me, but I felt an unexpected pang of disappointment. "We can send out communications. Let them know you're safe." Nyria shook her head slightly. "Not so simple. Our connections, not technology, you understand. The energy bonds you mentioned, yes, they will sense me eventually, but must be closer." She turned to look at me directly. "I am grateful for your rescue, for sanctuary, but cannot stay." I nodded, understanding her position, even as I realized how quickly I'd grown used to her presence. "We'll figure something out. Get you home safely." Her expression softened. "You are unusual, Axel Reed. Most would not risk for stranger." "Maybe I'm a bad miner," I suggested with a slight smile. Too soft-hearted for this line of work. No, she said seriously. Not soft. Strong in different way. Before I could respond, the monitoring station's alert system chimed, drawing our attention to the main display. A proximity warning flashed on the screen. I quickly moved to the console, accessing the exterior sensors. 3 unidentified vessels had entered our detection range, moving steadily toward the outpost. Nyria came to stand beside me, her skin dimming as she studied the screen. "Those shapes," she said, her voice suddenly tense. "Not like your ships." "No," I agreed, a knot forming in my stomach as I recognized the distinctive outlines. "Those are unmarked transports, the kind used by smugglers and poachers," Nyria finished, her skin now pulsing with rapid waves of fear. "They have found me." The ship's silhouettes on the monitor grew larger as they approached. My hand hovered over the outpost's emergency alert system while Nyria stood frozen beside me, her skin pulsing with fear. "How many poachers?" I asked, keeping my voice steady despite the adrenaline surging through me. "Many," she whispered. "Krell travels with at least 20. Dangerous ones." I didn't waste time asking who Krell was. I hit the emergency protocol, sending the alert through the outpost's communication system. Within seconds, Dom's voice came through the speaker. "Reed, what's happening?" 3 unmarked vessels approaching from the north quadrant. Poacher configuration. Battle stations. Now. The alarm blared throughout the outpost as I activated the defensive shields. They weren't military grade, just mining barriers designed to withstand crystal surges and radiation. But they might buy us time. Nyria gripped my arm, her touch sending that usual electrical tingle across my skin. "They will breach your defenses. They have weapons designed to disrupt energy fields." I was about to respond when the proximity warning changed. The ships were altering course, veering eastward away from the outpost. "They're not landing," I said, tracking their new trajectory. Dom burst into the monitoring room, his face flushed from running. "Are they attacking?" I shook my head, watching the vessel's path. "They're circling to the eastern crystal fields. Searching patterns," Nyria said, her luminescence flickering with nervous energy. "They do not know exactly where I am, only approximate location." We watched in tense silence as the ships completed their sweep of the eastern quadrant, then headed north toward the vast crystal plains that stretched beyond our mining claim. After nearly 15 minutes, they disappeared from our sensor range. "They'll be back," I said, finally releasing the breath I'd been holding. "Once they realize you're not in those areas." Dom moved to the monitoring station, checking the readouts. "We need to contact corporate security if poachers are operating in our sector." "No," I interrupted, catching both Dom and Nyria by surprise. "Not yet. They'll just evacuate the outpost and abandon Nyria to fend for herself." Dom's eyes narrowed. "You can't make that call alone, Reed." "I just did." I turned to him fully. "Give me a few days to figure this out. Those ships will maintain their search pattern away from us for now. We can strengthen our defenses in the meantime." After a tense staring contest, Dom finally nodded. 3 days. "Then I'm calling it in, with or without your approval." "Fair enough," I conceded, knowing it was the best compromise I'd get. 4 days after Nyria's arrival at Outpost Vega, the initial panic from the poacher sighting had settled into a cautious routine. No more unmarked vessels had appeared on our sensors. We'd enhanced our perimeter security and maintained regular patrols, but life at the outpost had resumed its normal rhythm, with one significant addition. Nyria had become a fixture in our research lab, working alongside Rima to analyze our crystal extraction methods. Her insights had already helped reduce energy fluctuations by 12%, impressing even the most skeptical members of the crew. I found myself drawn to the lab more often than my duties required, fascinated by her explanations of crystal energy patterns and flow dynamics. There was something about the way she spoke about energy, not as a resource to be harvested, but as a living current to be respected and guided, that challenged everything I thought I knew about mining. "The problem isn't your extraction point," she explained, pointing to the holographic display of our western mining zone. "It's the angle of approach. You're cutting across the natural energy flow, creating resistance." Rima nodded enthusiastically, adjusting the model, like swimming against a current instead of with it. Precisely, Nyria confirmed, her skin pulsing with pleased blue light. Energy wants to move in certain patterns. Work with those patterns, not against them. I leaned against the lab table, watching her slender fingers trace the energy pathways on the hologram. That goes against everything in the corporate extraction manual. Your manual was written by people who never truly understood crystal energy, Nyria replied, without a hint of condescension. They see only resource, not pattern. Rima had been called away to help with a calibration issue, leaving Nyria and me alone in the lab. As she continued working, I found myself studying her more closely. The circuit-like patterns on her skin seemed to change subtly as she concentrated. You know a lot more about crystal energy than someone who was just passing through on research, I observed. Nyria paused, her luminescence dimming slightly. I have studied such things. Before my capture, I moved to the storage unit, where we'd kept the few personal items recovered from her when she first arrived. Dom had insisted on securing them until we knew more about her. Standard protocol, he claimed. Now that she'd earned our trust, I'd been meaning to return them. These belong to you, I said, retrieving the small container. Sorry for the delay in getting them back to you. Nyria approached cautiously, looking at the container with a mixture of hope and sadness. I did not think anything survived. I opened it, revealing a few items, a small device similar to her translator, but more complex, an ornate metal band that might have been jewelry, and a crystal unlike any I'd seen in our mines, perfectly clear with a blue-green core that seemed to pulse with its own light. This is remarkable, I said, lifting the crystal carefully. I've never seen one with this level of clarity. As I turned it in my hand, my thumb accidentally pressed a nearly invisible seam. The crystal activated, projecting a holographic display of complex energy formulas and diagrams. At the bottom of the projection was an insignia I recognized immediately, the double helix symbol of the Galactic Science Academy. The display flickered, showing research notes written in both standard and what I assumed was Lumidian script. One name appeared repeatedly in the authorization codes, Dr. Nyria Valen. I looked up from the crystal to find Nyria watching me intently, her posture tense. You're Dr. Nyria Valen, I said, understanding now. The energy researcher who published that groundbreaking paper on crystalline resonance patterns 3 years ago. Her skin darkened to a deep purple embarrassment. I'd learned. You know of my work. Know of it? I cited it in my last 3 extraction proposals to corporate. I set the crystal down carefully, trying to process this revelation. Your theories on energy harmonization completely changed how advanced mining operations approach crystal extraction. Yet your company still uses outdated methods, she observed, quietly. Corporations move slowly, I said, still struggling to reconcile the renowned scientist with the frightened captive I'd rescued. Why didn't you tell us who you were? Nyria picked up the data crystal, her fingers tracing its edges. When first rescued, I did not know if I could trust. Later it did not seem important to my survival. Not important, Nyria. If we'd known you were a Galactic Science Academy researcher, we could have contacted them directly. They have resources, protocols for situations like this, resources that would bring attention, she countered. Attention that poachers would notice. She set the crystal down carefully. Safety first, titles later. I couldn't argue with her logic, even as I felt slightly foolish for not recognizing her sooner. What were you doing on Crystallis Moon? This isn't exactly approved research territory. Expedition to study raw crystal formations in natural state. Crystallis has unique energy properties not found elsewhere. Her luminescence brightened with professional enthusiasm. Was mapping resonance patterns when attacked. Others in my team, not so fortunate. The pain in her voice was unmistakable. I placed my hand near hers on the table. Not touching, but offering proximity. I'm sorry about your team. She nodded, her skin pulsing with soft waves of grief. After a moment, she straightened, visibly composing herself. Your extraction methods. I can improve them. Significantly. The abrupt change of subject was clearly deliberate, but I followed her lead. I'd welcome that. Our efficiency ratings have been dropping for months. Show me your current extraction sites. All data, I will analyze. For the next several hours, we worked side by side, poring over maps and sensor readings of our mining operations. Nyria pointed out inefficiencies I'd never noticed, explaining how the natural energy flows of crystal formations could be harnessed rather than disrupted. Here, she said, highlighting a section of the northern quadrant. Realign extractors to match this flow pattern, 30% improvement, minimum. That's against every protocol in the manual, I pointed out. Manuals written by those who see only resource, not living energy, she repeated. More firmly this time. I considered her suggestion. We could test it on one extractor first. See if your theory holds in practice. Not theory, she corrected, with a hint of professional pride. Proven science, just not yet adopted by your mining corporations. The confidence in her voice made me smile. All right, Dr. Volan. Let's put your proven science to the test. 2 days later, we were preparing a maintenance excursion to implement Nyria's modifications to our northern extractor array. The test runs on a smaller unit had shown promising results, a 22% increase in efficiency with significantly reduced energy fluctuations. You sure you want to come along? I asked as Nyria checked the equipment in the transport vehicle. We can handle the adjustments based on your specifications. Must monitor initial energy change personally, she insisted. Readings cannot show everything. Some patterns must be felt. Dom approached, handing me the final authorization for the excursion. Keep your comms open. All those poacher ships might still be in the area. We'll be fine, I assured him. Just a quick trip to the northern array and back. 4 hours tops. And take this, he added, passing me a pulse rifle. Just in case, I nodded. Securing the weapon in the transport. Nyria watched the exchange, her expression unreadable. Necessary, she asked, once Dom had left. Precautionary, I corrected, climbing into the driver's seat. Ready. She settled into the passenger seat beside me, her silver filament hair lifting slightly in the recycled air of the vehicle. Ready. We departed through the north gate, following the well-worn path that wound between tall crystal formations. Crystallis Moon's perpetual twilight cast everything in shades of blue and purple, the crystal fields glittering around us. Nyria was quiet for most of the journey, her eyes taking in the landscape with scientific intensity. Occasionally, she would point out particularly interesting formations or energy patterns that my human eyes couldn't detect. How can you see the energy flows? I asked, genuinely curious. Not see exactly. Feel. She touched her chest. Lumidians evolved with crystal environments, sensitivity to energy gradients, useful for navigation, finding resources, and apparently for revolutionizing extraction science, I added. A small smile played across her face. Science began as survival skill. True for all species, I think. We reached the northern array after about an hour's drive. The extraction equipment stood tall among the crystal field. A stark reminder of why we were here on this moon in the first place. Nyria immediately set to work, directing me to adjust specific settings on the array's control systems while she monitored the energy reactions. Her expertise was evident in every precise instruction, every calculated modification. Reduce power input by 17%, she directed, her hands hovering near a crystal formation that stood just outside the extraction zone. And move alignment 20 degrees eastward. I made the adjustments, watching as the extraction beam realigned itself to follow what appeared to be an invisible path that only Nyria could detect. There, she said with satisfaction as the equipment ran at a noticeably lower pitch. Now it follows natural flow, more energy with less effort. I checked the readings and whistled softly. Efficiency up 35% already. Corporate would pay a fortune for this kind of improvement. Knowledge should not be for purchase, she said simply, should be shared for betterment. Noble sentiment, I replied, but not how things typically work in human space. Perhaps humans should reconsider typical workings, she suggested, her tone light but the point serious. I was about to respond when my attention was caught by a dark line of clouds gathering on the horizon. That doesn't look good. Nyria turned to look where I was looking, her luminescence dimming with concern. I checked the weather monitoring system on my wrist device. No storm warnings in the forecast. Crystal fields generate own weather patterns sometimes, especially after extraction disruptions. The storm was approaching faster than seemed natural. We needed to get back to the transport immediately. We needed to get back to the transport. Pack up. We worked quickly, securing the extraction array for the incoming storm and gathering our tools. By the time we reached the transport, the edge of the storm had arrived, bringing with it gusting winds that carried sharp particles of crystal dust. I started the engine, but a sudden violent gust rocked the vehicle. Warning lights flashed across the control panel. Stabilizer damage, I muttered, running a quick diagnostic. Crystal dust in the intakes. We can't outrun the storm in this condition. Nyria pointed toward a ridge of dark stone about 200 meters away. Shelter there. Natural cave formation. I grabbed the emergency pack and the pulse rifle, then nodded to Nyria. Stay close to me. This dust can cut straight through fabric if the wind picks up more. We abandoned the transport. Lightning struck a crystal formation nearby, sending a shower of energized fragments into the air. Nyria ducked instinctively, her skin flashing with alarm. The cave entrance was partially hidden behind a fallen crystal pillar, but Nyria led us straight to it with unerring accuracy. We squeezed inside just as the storm unleashed its full fury, lightning now striking continuously across the crystal. The cave extended about 10 meters into the ridge, providing ample protection from the I activated a light from my equipment belt, illuminating our temporary shelter. Nice navigation. Setting down the emergency pack. How did you know this was here? Energy patterns. Brushing crystal dust from her clothing. Natural formations create distinctive signatures. Caves interrupt pattern. I checked my communicator, unsurprised to find the signal blocked by the storm's electrical entrance. Looks like we're stuck here until this passes. Comms are down. Nyria moved deeper into the cave, examining the walls with interest. Safe place. Old place. Energy residues very stable. I unpacked emergency rations and a thermal blanket from the back, arranging them on a relatively flat section of the cave. At least we're prepared for a wait. These storms can last anywhere from 1 hour to 12. Nyria settled across from me, her luminescence providing a soft blue glow that complemented my portable light. For a while we sat in comfortable silence, listening to the storm rage outside. Your work with the extractor was I finally said. You really do understand crystal energy better than anyone I've ever met. My research focus for 7 years. Important work for my people, for all people who use crystal energy. And now you're stuck in a cave with a mining crew leader, instead of in a proper research facility. I observed ruefully. Her expression softened. Not such bad outcome. Have learned much about practical apps, about human adaptability. Something in her tone made me look up and meet her eyes directly. Those otherworldly eyes held mine for a long moment, before she looked away, her skin darkening slightly with what I now recognized as her equivalent of a blush. There's something else you haven't told me, about who you are. The pulsing of her luminescence quickened, confirming my suspicion. What makes you think this? The way you carry yourself. Your knowledge isn't just academic, it's cultural. And that ornate band we found with your belongings, that's not standard researcher equipment, it's ceremonial. Nyria was silent for so long I thought she might not answer. Finally she reached for the emergency pack where I'd placed her recovered belongings. This, she said, removing the ornate metal band, is royal insignia. Identifies family lineage. House of Valen. I watched as she turned the band in her hands, its intricate patterns catching the light. "You're not just a scientist, are you? All things at once," she said softly. "Scientist, royal family member, diplomatic envoy." She looked up at me, her expression open and vulnerable. "Cousin to Ambassador Talon, third-tier succession to Lumidian High Council." I was more surprised by the revelation than I acted. Not just a scientist, but royalty from an advanced alien civilization. The gap between our worlds suddenly seemed vast and unbridgeable. "That's why the poachers targeted you specifically." I realized, "You're valuable in more ways than one." She nodded, her luminescence dimming. "Ransom, research extraction. Many motives, and your people. They must be searching for you." "Yes." She set the band down carefully. "Soon will find me. Our energy bond network. What I explained before about connection grows stronger when more Lumidians are near. As search parties approach Crystallis, will detect my presence." "How soon?" I asked, trying to keep my voice neutral despite the sudden tightness in my chest. "Days perhaps, difficult to know exactly." She studied my face. "This troubles you." I looked away, focusing on the storm outside. "It complicates things. Because of who I am. Because of who we both are," I corrected. "You're Lumidian royalty, with responsibilities to your people. I'm a human mining crew leader with responsibilities to mine. Different worlds, different duties." Lightning flashed outside, illuminating the cave entrance in stark white light. The storm was intensifying, matching the turbulence I felt internally. "Different does not mean incompatible," Nyria said after a moment. "Your human saying, opposites attract." I couldn't help but smile at her attempt to use human idioms. "Usually applies to magnets, not people from different planets. Energy principles same throughout universe," she countered, moving slightly closer to me. "Different charges create strongest bonds." The air between us seemed to vibrate with unspoken tension. Her proximity sent that now common tingle across my skin, more pronounced than ever before. "Nyria," I began, not entirely sure what I planned to say. She placed her hand near mine on the cave floor, not touching, but close enough that I could feel the energy emanating from her skin. "I understand complications, Axel. Royal duties, different worlds, but cannot deny energy between us." A particularly violent thunderclap shook the cave, but neither of us flinched or looked away. The storm outside had become a distant concern compared to the tension building between us. "What happens when your people find you?" I asked, my voice low. "Do not know exactly," she admitted, "but we'll face that moment when comes. For now," her luminescence brightened, casting patterns of light across my face. "For now, we are here. In this moment." Her words felt wise. So much of my life had been spent planning for contingencies, preventing disasters, that I rarely allowed myself to exist fully in the present. Slowly, deliberately, I closed the small distance between our hands, placing mine over hers. The contact sent waves of warmth up my arm that awakened every nerve. Her skin pulsed with bright patterns that spread from where our hands touched, racing along the circuit-like lines of her arm and across her body. We stayed like that, connected yet still separate, as the storm raged outside our shelter. Two beings from different worlds, finding unexpected connection in a cave on a distant moon, surrounded by the very crystals that had brought us together. The shield calibration reports glowed on my tablet as I made my way through Outpost Vega's main corridor. 7 days since finding Nyria, and already the outpost felt different. Her presence had transformed not just our extraction efficiency, but the entire crew's energy. Even Dom had stopped referring to our guest as the alien, and started using her name. I found Nyria in the research lab, bent over a modified sensor array with Rima. The two had formed an immediate bond over shared scientific curiosity. Nyria's skin pulsed with soft blue light as she manipulated tiny crystal fragments with precise movements. "The resonance pattern stabilizes when aligned along this axis," she explained, her translator device no longer struggling with technical terms. Rima nodded enthusiastically, adjusting her glasses as she recorded the readings. That's brilliant. We've been fighting against the natural energy flow this whole time. I leaned against the door frame, content to watch them work. Since our moment in the cave during the storm 3 days ago, something had changed between Nyria and me. Nothing had been said explicitly, but each glance held weight. Each accidental touch lingered. Nyria sensed my presence before I spoke, her luminescence brightening as she looked up. Axel, the modifications are progressing well. 37% efficiency increase across all extractors, Rima reported proudly. Corporate would pay millions for this technology, and yet we're giving it away for free, I said with a smile. Try explaining that to the board. Knowledge shouldn't be hoarded, Nyria replied, setting down her tools. Energy flows better when shared. Our eyes met across the lab, and that now recognizable current passed between us. Rima glanced between us, poorly hiding a knowing smile before, suddenly remembering urgent business elsewhere. I'll just go check those readings in the control room, she mumbled, slipping out the door with uncharacteristic tactfulness. Alone now, Nyria moved around the lab table toward me. Your crew has adapted to my presence remarkably well. You saved their lives and improved their work efficiency. Not much to complain about. Not all humans would be so accepting. We're miners. Practical people. I stepped closer, drawn by the gentle pulses of light rippling across her skin. Results matter more than differences. Before either of us could close the remaining distance, the outpost's communication system crackled to life. Read to the command center. Emergency transmission incoming. The urgency in Dom's voice broke the moment. I gave Nyria an apologetic look before heading for the command center, her footsteps following close behind. The main monitor displayed a static-filled transmission from Outpost Kappa 12, the nearest human settlement to our position, about 70 kilometers south. Armed vessels moving through the sector, came the broken message. Unmarked transports, heavily modified, shot down our patrol drone, when the transmission cut out momentarily before resuming. Hostile intent. They're hunting something, or someone. Exercise extreme caution, and the transmission ended abruptly, leaving the command center in tense silence. When was this received? I asked. 17 minutes ago, Dom replied, his face grim. They haven't responded to our requests for clarification. Nyria's skin had darkened to a deep indigo, her version of pallor. They found me. We don't know that for certain, I said, though the pit in my stomach suggested otherwise. Activate the perimeter sensors, I ordered. Full range, maximum sensitivity. If those vessels come within 10 kilometers of us, I want to know. Dom nodded, already inputting the commands. Should we contact corporate? Request security reinforcement. Nearest corporate security is 3 days out at best, I reminded him. By then whoever's out there will either have moved on or already paid us a visit. The rest of the day passed in tense preparation. I ordered non-essential operations suspended, and had the crew move our most valuable equipment to secure storage. Nyria stayed close to the command center, her scientific focus replaced by watchful vigilance. As night fell over Crystallis, or what passed for night in our perpetual twilight, I found myself on the observation deck with Nyria, scanning the horizon with high-powered binoculars. Nothing yet, I said, lowering the binoculars to rub my tired eyes. They will come at low light, Nyria said softly. When most humans sleep, standard poacher tactic. I glanced at her. You've studied them. Survival required understanding them. During captivity, I listened, learned their patterns. Before I could respond, a small alert flashed on my wrist device. The motion sensors on the western perimeter had detected something. I quickly checked the reading. Wildlife probably, I said. Too small to be a vehicle or human. Nyria moved to the western viewport, her eyes checking the crystal fields that stretched toward the horizon. Not wildlife, she whispered. Look there. I joined her, raising the binoculars again. At first I saw nothing but the usual silhouettes of crystal formations against the dusky sky. Then a brief flash of light caught my attention. A reflection off something metallic, approximately 2 kilometers out. Drones, Nyria confirmed, her voice tight. Scout units, searching patterns. I didn't question how she knew. Instead I activated my communicator. Dom. Silent alert. Possible hostile reconnaissance in the western quadrant. Activate Protocol 7. Copy that, came Dom's immediate response. Protocol 7 meant minimal light, minimal radio communication, and all crew to battle stations. Within minutes, the outpost's external lights dimmed to emergency levels, and the crew moved with practiced efficiency to their assigned positions. I stayed at the observation deck with Nyria, tracking the movements of the drones as they methodically swept the area surrounding our outpost. Their search pattern was too precise to be random. They were looking for something specific. A soft vibration from my communicator alerted me to a message from the perimeter sensors. I checked the readout, and felt my chest tighten. 3 vessels approaching from the north, unmarked, landing 2 kilometers from the outpost. Nyria's luminescence darkened further. It's them. I didn't need to ask how she knew. The fear in her voice was confirmation enough. We quickly moved to the security monitoring room, where Dom had already pulled up the thermal imaging from our perimeter cameras. The fuzzy outlines of 3 ships were clearly visible, along with smaller heat signatures disembarking. I count at least 20 figures. Dom reported. Heavily armed, based on their profiles. They'll have shadow leapers too, Nyria added. Not visible on thermal imaging. I turned to Rima, who had joined us in the monitoring room. How are those shield modifications coming? Functional, but untested, she replied, nervously. Nyria's energy manipulation principles should strengthen our barrier by about 60%, but against specialized weapons, it will buy us time, Nyria interjected. I can strengthen them further. Direct connection. What do you mean direct connection? I asked. My energy manipulation. Connect to your shield generators. Enhance performance. She turned to Rima. Show me primary nodes. As they hurried off toward the shield control room, I gathered the rest of the crew in the main hall. 15 faces looked back at me, a mix of determination and fear evident in their expressions. We have hostiles approaching, I announced, without preamble. Poachers, likely the same group that captured Nyria. They're well armed and experienced, but so are we. We're miners, not fighters, someone pointed out. Yes, we are, I agreed. Which means we know how to use our equipment better than anyone. Rodriguez, Chen, convert the plasma cutters to defensive mode. Vargas, set up the sonic disruptors along the eastern corridor. They're designed for breaking crystal formations, but they'll work just as well on anyone trying to breach our doors. I continued assigning tasks, transforming our mining outpost into a makeshift fortress. Mining equipment might not have been designed as weapons, but in creative hands, they could be just as effective, and we had the home field advantage. Dom approached me, as the crew dispersed to their tasks. Reed, we need to discuss evacuation protocols. No one's evacuating, I stated firmly. Not all of us, he clarified. But Nyria, she's who they want. If we get her out, and send her where? Alone in the crystal fields with poachers hunting her. I shook my head. No, we protect our own. Dom studied my face for a long moment before nodding. She's one of us now, then. She is, I confirmed, not wanting to examine too closely the depth of conviction behind those words. An hour before dawn, our preparations were complete. The outpost's perimeter now featured an electrified barrier, improvised from extraction equipment, calibrated to a frequency that would be particularly disruptive to shadow leapers. Rima and Nyria had modified our shields to incorporate crystalline resonance patterns that would strengthen them against energy weapons. I found Nyria in the shield control room, her hands pressed against a specialized interface Rima had created. Energy visibly flowed from her body into the system, her skin pulsing with waves of light that matched the rhythm of the shield generators. How long can you maintain that? I asked, concerned about the strain evident in her posture. Long enough, she replied, her voice tight with concentration. Energy transfer is sustainable, for now. They're moving, came Dom's voice over the comm system. Multiple heat signatures approaching from the north and west. Estimate contact in 15 minutes. I placed my hand on Nyria's shoulder, feeling the now recognizable electrical tingle of her energy. You've done enough. We need you at full strength if when they breach the outer defenses. She nodded reluctantly, removing her hands from the interface. The shield energy continued to pulse with the resonance pattern she had established. Your people fight for me, she said softly. Risk their lives. That's what people do for those they care about, I replied simply. Her eyes met mine, swirling with emotion that transcended our different biologies. Axel, if something happens, it won't, I interrupted. But if it does, find your way back to your people. Promise me that. Before she could respond, the outpost's perimeter alarm blared. The attack had begun sooner than expected. There at the northern barrier, Dom's voice came through the speakers. And we've got movement at the loading bay. Go to the central command room, I told Nyria. It's the most secure location. I can help, she protested. Not if they capture you again, I countered. Please, Nyria. After a moment's hesitation, she nodded. I watched her hurry toward the command center before grabbing a pulse rifle and heading for the northern corridor. The scene that greeted me was barely controlled chaos. The poachers had breached the outer perimeter more quickly than anticipated, and were now attempting to cut through the secondary barrier. Through the reinforced viewing ports, I could see figures in dark tactical gear, using specialized cutting tools against our defenses. Hold this position, I ordered the miners stationed there. If they break through, fall back to checkpoint 2. Do not engage directly, if you can avoid it. I moved quickly through the outpost, checking each defensive position and adjusting our strategy as the attack unfolded. The poachers were well organized and clearly experienced with breaching secured facilities. What they hadn't counted on was the creative application of mining equipment as defensive weapons. When they breached the eastern maintenance hatch, they were met with a barrage of sonic pulses that shattered their protective gear and sent half the team retreating in pain. When another group attempted to cut through the floor from beneath the storage bay, our quickly improvised pressure sensors gave us enough warning to flood the area with industrial coolant, literally freezing them in place. But we were outnumbered and facing professionals. 30 minutes into the attack, they had established footholds in both the loading bay and the secondary research lab. Fall back to the inner corridors, I ordered over the comm system. Implement containment protocol. As I headed toward the loading bay to assist the team there, the lights flickered ominously. The main power was fluctuating under the strain of combat and our enhanced shields. I rounded a corner and found myself face to face with 3 poachers. Their tactical gear was high-end, with built-in energy shields and weapons I recognized as military grade. This wasn't just any poaching operation, this was professional, well-funded. They spotted me at the same moment I saw them. I fired first, my pulse rifle sending a concentrated burst of energy toward the leader. His shield absorbed most of the impact, but the force still knocked him back against the wall. The other 2 returned fire immediately. I dove behind a storage container, feeling the heat of energy blasts passing overhead. Calculating my options, I reached for the small sonic disruptor at my belt, a mining tool for precision work that could also at close range temporarily disable electronic equipment. I rolled out from cover just long enough to activate the disruptor, aiming it at the ceiling fixtures above the poachers. The sonic pulse hit its target, dislodging heavy equipment that crashed down on one attacker. The disruption also temporarily interfered with their shield generators, giving me the opening needed to take down the second poacher with a well-placed shot. The leader had recovered, however, and charged toward me with surprising speed. We collided, my rifle knocked from my hands in the impact. The fight became hand-to-hand, my mining-hardened strength against his tactical training. He landed a solid blow to my ribs that sent pain lancing through my side, but I countered with an uppercut that cracked against his jaw. As we grappled, I noticed a symbol embossed on his body armor, a stylized claw grasping a crystal, the mark of Draz Krell's operation. Using a mining pressure point technique developed for emergencies in tight spaces, I managed to break his hold and shove him back. I scrambled for my fallen rifle, but a shot from his weapon hit the floor beside me, scorching my hand with molten metal splatter. I kicked out, connecting with his knee with enough force to hear something snap. He howled in pain but remained standing, drawing a secondary weapon from his belt. Backup teams to the main corridor. I gasped into my communicator, ducking behind minimal cover as energy blasts tore into the wall behind me. "Reed," Dom's voice came through, distorted with static. "They've breached the command center, Nyria." The communication cut off abruptly. Cold fear gripped me. The command center was supposed to be our most secure location. If they had breached it, I had no time to complete the thought as more poachers entered the corridor from the loading bay. Cut off from both directions, I made a desperate decision and blasted the floor grating beneath me with my recovered rifle. I dropped through to the maintenance tunnel below, landing hard on my already injured side. The maintenance tunnels ran throughout the outpost, designed for accessing utilities and conducting repairs. They were cramped and dark, but I knew them better than anyone. I navigated quickly toward the command center, ignoring the pain flaring in my ribs with each movement. When I reached the access point nearest the command center, I paused to listen. The sounds of combat had lessened, replaced by the methodical movements of people searching the area. Through the grating, I could see 5 poachers in the command center, systematically downloading data from our systems and searching through equipment. Nyria was nowhere in sight, nor were any of my crew. That could be good or bad, either they had escaped or they had been captured and moved elsewhere. I was preparing to retreat and find another approach when the command center doors slid open. A tall figure entered, his presence immediately drawing the attention of the other poachers. Even without an introduction, I knew who he was. Draz Krell. He moved with predatory grace, his lean body outfitted in high-end tactical gear that featured more weaponry than strictly necessary. The cybernetic implant at the base of his skull pulsed with red light that matched his artificial eye. Everything about him radiated calculated menace. "Report," he demanded, his voice cold and precise. "We've secured the primary systems, sir," one poacher responded. "But the Lumidian isn't here. They must have moved her when the attack began." "Find her," Krell ordered. "Every minute we waste increases the chance of outside interference. The client is paying for intact merchandise, not excuses." As they dispersed to continue the search, I carefully retreated deeper into the maintenance tunnel. I needed to find Nyria before they did, but I also needed to regroup with whatever crew members were still fighting. I made my way toward the secondary lab, using the maintenance tunnels to avoid detection. When I reached the access point, I heard the unmistakable sound of Rima's excited whisper. "Frequency modulation is holding but needs constant adjustment. If we can just..." I tapped gently on the grating. The whispers immediately ceased. "It's Reed," I called softly. "I'm coming up." I pushed open the access panel and emerged into the secondary lab to find Rima, Dom, and 3 other crew members barricaded inside. Relief washed over Dom's face upon seeing me. "We thought they'd gotten you," he said. "Not yet," I replied grimly. "Where's Nyria?" "She insisted on going to the primary lab," Rima explained. "Said something about using the crystal formations there to create a disruptive energy field." "Alone?" I demanded. "She wouldn't let anyone go with her," Dom answered. "Said we'd just get in the way." "Reed, that woman is either brilliant or crazy." "Probably both," I muttered. "I need to get to her." "The primary lab is too exposed. There's a reason she chose it," Rima interjected. "It has the highest concentration of raw crystal samples. If she can channel enough energy through them, she could overload their equipment," I finished, understanding Nyria's plan. It was clever but incredibly dangerous. That much energy channeled through one person could be fatal, even for a Lumidian. "I'm going after her," I stated. "Dom, keep everyone here and be ready to move on my signal." I returned to the maintenance tunnels, navigating with practiced efficiency toward the primary lab. As I approached, I could feel a change in the air, a subtle vibration and the hair-raising sensation of concentrated energy. Through the access grating, I saw Nyria in the center of the lab, surrounded by crystal formations arranged in a precise pattern. Her skin glowed with intense luminescence, far brighter than I'd ever seen. Energy visibly flowed between her body and the crystals in rhythmic pulses that were gradually increasing in frequency. She was creating a massive energy field, but the strain was evident in her trembling limbs and the erratic patterns of light across her skin. She couldn't maintain this for long without serious consequences. I was about to call out to her when the lab doors slid open. Draz Krell entered, flanked by 2 poachers with weapons raised. Nyria's eyes snapped open, the energy pattern faltering momentarily before stabilizing. "Impressive display, Dr. Valen," Krell said, his mismatched eyes evaluating her with cold calculation, but ultimately futile. Nyria said nothing, maintaining her concentration on the energy field. "You've caused me considerable inconvenience," Krell continued, circling her slowly. "The client was most displeased when you disappeared. Fortunately, the tracking implant we placed performed admirably, despite your attempts to disrupt it." He gestured to one of his companions, who produced a small device that emitted a pulsing signal. "It's been tracking your unique energy signature, weak at a distance, but effective enough to lead us here." Nyria's expression remained defiant, though I could see her strength waning. The energy field was taking too much from her. I needed to act. Quietly opening the access panel, I slipped into the lab behind a row of equipment. From my position, I could see both Nyria and Krell, but remained out of their direct line of sight. "You have a choice," Krell told Nyria. "Come willingly and your mining friends live. Resist, and we leave no witnesses." "Your history suggests you leave no witnesses regardless," Nyria replied, her voice strained but steady. Krell smiled thinly. "You've been researching me. I'm flattered." "Know your enemy," she countered. "Indeed," Krell signaled to his men. "Prep her for transport. Use the suppressors." As one poacher approached with what looked like energy-dampening restraints, I made my move. I fired my pulse rifle at the lab's sprinkler system, sending a cascade of water down onto the room's occupants. The sudden downpour created momentary confusion, allowing me to take out one poacher with a direct hit. The second poacher recovered quickly, returning fire in my direction. I dove for cover behind a lab table, feeling it shake as energy blasts tore into its surface. Krell meanwhile had drawn his own weapon, an advanced model with targeting assistance that allowed him to fire with unnatural accuracy even through the falling water. A blast hit the floor near my position, showering me with superheated fragments. "The extraction team leader," Krell called out, his voice cutting through the chaos. How noble, how predictable. I moved quickly between tables, staying low and changing position to avoid his tracking. Nyria remained at the center of the room, still maintaining the energy field despite the water and combat around her. I noticed that the water seemed to avoid her immediate vicinity, repelled by the energy she was channeling. "You'll find I'm full of surprises," I called back, trying to draw Krell's attention away from Nyria. It worked. He turned toward my voice, firing a series of precise shots that forced me to retreat further from Nyria. I realized his strategy too late. He was deliberately separating us, driving me back toward the corridor while his remaining poachers circled toward Nyria. With a surge of desperation, I broke from cover, firing continuously to force Krell into a defensive position. I needed to reach Nyria before the poacher did. I was halfway across the lab when Krell emerged from behind a column, his weapon aimed directly at my chest. At this range, even my mining gear wouldn't provide meaningful protection. "Predictable after all," he said, with cold satisfaction, his finger tightening on the trigger. I braced for the impact, but instead of the expected blast, Krell's weapon emitted a weak sputter. He looked down at it in momentary confusion before realization dawned on his face. "Clever," he muttered, turning toward Nyria. She stood with one hand extended toward him, her skin blazing with intense light. The circuit-like patterns across her body pulsed with energy that seemed to flow directly from Krell's weapon and equipment. "Energy can be given," she said, her voice resonating with power, "or taken." Krell reached for a secondary weapon, but it too failed to activate. All around him, electronic equipment flickered and died as Nyria systematically drained every power source within her reach. In the moment of Krell's stunned immobility, I closed the distance between us and drove my shoulder into his midsection. We crashed to the floor, grappling for advantage. Despite his weapons failing, Krell was a formidable physical opponent, his cybernetic enhancements giving him unnatural strength. He landed a punch to my injured ribs that sent white-hot pain through my body, but I countered with an elbow strike to his throat that had him gasping for air. As we struggled, I became aware of the energy in the room changing, the vibration in the air intensifying to an almost painful degree. Nyria had amplified her energy field, focusing it directly on us. I felt my muscles seize up as electric-like current passed through my body, painful but controllable. Krell, with his extensive cybernetic implants, fared far worse. He convulsed violently, the red light of his artificial eye flickering erratically before going dark. When the current stopped, Krell lay unconscious but breathing. I struggled to my feet, my entire body tingling painfully from the energy exposure. Nyria swayed where she stood, the intense light of her skin dimming rapidly. I rushed to her side, just as her knees buckled, catching her before she hit the floor. "That was reckless," I said, supporting her weight against me. "Effective," she corrected weakly, her skin now barely glowing. The lab doors slid open, and Dom appeared with several crew members, all armed. He surveyed the scene, the unconscious Krell, the defeated poachers, the water still dripping from the ceiling. "Remind me never to underestimate either of you," he said, lowering his weapon. "We've secured the loading bay and north corridor. The remaining poachers are retreating. Make sure they don't take their ships," I ordered. "We need those vessels secured for evidence." Dom nodded, already communicating the orders through his comm unit. "Nyria needs medical attention," I added, noting the way her luminescence continued to fade. "I am functional," she protested, though she made no attempt to stand without my support. "Overriding your self-assessment," I replied, carefully lifting her into my arms despite the protest from my injured ribs. "Medical bay, now." The aftermath of the attack left the outpost damaged but functional. 8 poachers dead, 14 captured, including Dre's Krell. The remaining attackers had fled into the crystal fields, where the outpost security drones tracked them until they were too far to pose a threat. 3 of my crew had sustained serious injuries, but all would recover. The poachers' ships had been secured, providing valuable evidence of their operation that would be turned over to galactic security once communications were re-established. I found myself in the medical bay as night fell again over Crystallis Moon. Patel had finished treating my injuries, 2 cracked ribs, a burned hand and various cuts and bruises, and moved on to other patients. I sat on the edge of an examination table, applying healing gel to a particularly nasty cut on my forearm. Nyria occupied the adjacent bed, her skin slowly regaining its natural luminescence after the dangerous energy drain she had experienced. Dr. Patel had admitted she didn't know enough about Lumidian physiology to provide proper treatment, but Nyria had assured us that time and proximity to crystal energy would restore her. "You should be resting," I told her, noticing she was watching me treat my wound. "As should you," she countered softly. We shared a moment of comfortable silence, both too exhausted for pretenses. "That was quite a trick you pulled with Krell's weapons," I finally said. "Can all Lumidians do that? Energy manipulation, yes. To that extent, no." She adjusted her position slightly, wincing with the effort. "Royal genetic line carries stronger abilities, more focused. You could have told me that's what you were planning. No time. And you would have objected. Because it nearly killed you," I pointed out. Her expression softened, was afraid. "Not for me." She looked at me. "For you. When Krell had you targeted, the simple admission affected me more than I expected." I set aside the healing gel and moved to sit on the edge of her bed, close enough to feel the gentle current that always seemed to emanate from her skin. "I thought I'd lost you when they breached the command center," I admitted. "I don't think I've ever been that scared. Not just rescue mission anymore." She asked, echoing thoughts I'd barely admitted to myself. "No," I replied quietly. "Not for a while now." Her hand moved to cover mine, the known tingle of energy passing between us, stronger and more focused than before. The circuit-like patterns on her skin brightened where our hands connected, sending waves of light up her arm in rhythmic pulses. "Complicated," she said, repeating what we'd acknowledged in the cave. "Different worlds. Different responsibilities." "Very complicated," I agreed, turning my hand to interlace our fingers more fully. "But I'm starting to think some complications are worth facing." The gentle pulsing of her luminescence quickened. I leaned closer, drawn by something that transcended our biological differences, something that felt remarkably like. The medical bay's communication panel chimed loudly, startling us both. Dom's voice came through, tense and urgent. "Reed, we're receiving a high-priority transmission. A Lumidian diplomatic vessel has just entered orbit around Crystallis Moon. They're requesting direct communication with the outpost, and specifically asking for Princess Nyria Velen." Nyria's hand tightened around mine, her skin pulsing with complicated patterns of light. "Your people found you," I said, trying to keep my voice neutral despite the sudden heaviness in my chest. "Yes," she confirmed softly. "Ambassador Talon, my cousin." The implications hung between us, unspoken but undeniable. Her rescue was complete. Her people had come for her. Whatever had been building between us now faced its greatest complication yet. "We should answer that transmission," I said, reluctantly releasing her hand and standing. The loss of contact left my skin cold where her energy had warmed it. Nyria nodded, her expression carefully composed, though her luminescence betrayed her emotional turbulence with erratic pulses of light. As I helped her to her feet, supporting her still weakened body with an arm around her waist, I tried not to think about what the arrival of a Lumidian diplomatic vessel meant for us. For now, I focused on the immediate task, responding to her people, ensuring her safety, completing what had begun as a simple rescue mission. The observation deck offered the best view of the crystal plains stretching toward the horizon. I stood at the viewport, watching the distant flashes of light that signaled the approaching Lumidian vessel. 10 days since finding Nyria in that dark tunnel, and already everything was about to change again. "How long until they land?" Dom asked, joining me at the window. 20 minutes, according to their last transmission. I kept my voice neutral despite the knot forming in my stomach. "Is the reception area prepared?" "As good as we can make a mining outpost look for royalty," he replied with a hint of dry humor. "Rima's been polishing equipment that hasn't seen a cloth in years." I nodded absently, my attention fixed on the approaching ship as it descended through Crystallis Moon's perpetual twilight. Even at this distance, the vessel was impressive, sleek and elegant, where human ships were utilitarian, with a hull that seemed to ripple with the same bioluminescence as Nyria's skin. "You all right?" Dom asked after a moment of silence. "Fine," I replied automatically. Dom gave me a skeptical look. "Right. That's why you've been staring at the same crystal formation for 10 minutes straight." I sighed, running a hand through my hair. "Just thinking about the diplomatic implications. This is the first official Lumidian delegation to visit a human mining outpost." "Sure," Dom said, not bothering to hide his disbelief. "The diplomatic implications. Nothing to do with the princess you've been inseparable from for the past week." Before I could formulate a response that wouldn't reveal too much, the communication panel chimed. "Reed," came Rima's excited voice. "You need to see this. The Lumidian ship, it's incredible." I activated the external cameras, bringing up a closer view of the approaching vessel on the main screen. The ship had begun its landing sequence, descending toward the wide crystal plain about half a kilometer from our outpost. It moved with impossible grace for something its size, trailing patterns of light that mimicked the natural energy flows of the crystal formations below. "I've never seen propulsion technology like that," Dom muttered, professional interest momentarily overriding everything else. The ship touched down with barely a disturbance to the crystalline surface, settling into position as if it belonged there, a perfect integration of advanced technology and natural environment. As landing struts extended to stabilize the vessel, portions of its hull moved and reconfigured, revealing what appeared to be crystal-based energy collectors, that immediately began to pulse with the same rhythms as the surrounding formations. "They're tapping directly into the crystal energy field," I observed. "No wonder they navigate these regions so effectively." The outpost's communication system activated. "Outpost Vega, this is Ambassador Talon of the Lumidian Diplomatic Corps, requesting permission to approach with delegation." I straightened my posture before responding, suddenly aware of my mining uniform's worn condition and the healing cuts still visible on my face. "Ambassador Talon, this is Extraction Team Leader Axel Reed, permission granted. We'll meet your delegation at the main entrance. Acknowledged, Team Leader Reed. We appreciate your hospitality. I turned to Dom. Gather the senior crew. Full protocol. As Dom left to make the arrangements, I headed toward the medical bay where Nyria had been recovering from her energy depletion. I found her already dressed in the formal attire Rima had helped assemble, a combination of modified outpost clothing and salvaged pieces of her original garments. Even in this improvised outfit, she carried herself with unmistakable dignity. Her luminescence brightened when she saw me, sending patterns of light cascading across her skin. They have arrived, she stated rather than asked. Yes? Landing now. I hesitated, suddenly unsure what to say. Your cousin seems formal. A small smile played across her face. Ambassador Talon is always formal. It is his function. Are you ready for this? I asked, offering my arm for support. Though she had recovered significantly, she still tired easily after the massive energy expenditure during the attack. I am ready, she replied, placing her hand on my arm. The usual current passed between us, stronger now that she had begun to regain her strength. But perhaps not eager. I understood the sentiment perfectly. We walked in silence through the corridors toward the main entrance. Each lost in thoughts neither of us seemed ready to voice. The senior crew had assembled in the entrance hall. Dom, Rima, Dr. Patel and the section leaders, all in their cleanest uniforms. They parted respectfully as Nyria and I approached, taking positions at the front of the group. Open the main doors, I ordered, straightening my shoulders. The heavy doors slid open, revealing the crystal plains bathed in the perpetual twilight of Crystallis Moon. The Lumidian ship dominated the view, its elegant shape making our industrial outpost look crude and primitive by comparison. A delegation of 6 figures was already approaching, moving with the same fluid grace I had come to associate with Nyria. At their head walked a tall Lumidian male, whose resemblance to Nyria was unmistakable, though his features were more angular, his skin a deeper shade that changed between blue and purple. The circuit-like patterns on his skin were more elaborate than Nyria's, particularly around his temples and hands. He wore formal attire that combined flowing fabrics with crystalline elements that caught and reflected light with each movement. Beside me, Nyria's posture subtly changed, her royal training evidently taking over as her cousin approached. I felt a momentary pang as I realized I was seeing a side of her I hadn't witnessed before. The princess rather than the scientist or survivor. The delegation halted a respectful distance from our entrance. Ambassador Talon stepped forward, his opalescent eyes taking in the outpost and our assembled crew before focusing on Nyria. For a moment his formal demeanor cracked, revealing profound relief as he spoke in the musical Lumidian language. Nyria responded in kind, her voice carrying the same melodic quality though tempered with obvious emotion. After this brief exchange, the ambassador composed himself and switched to flawless standard. Team Leader Reed, he said, inclining his head slightly. On behalf of the Lumidian High Council and the House of Valen, I extend our deepest gratitude for the rescue and protection of Princess Nyria. Ambassador Talon, I replied with equal formality. Outpost Vega welcomes you and your delegation. Princess Nyria has been an honored guest and valuable ally during her time with us. The careful diplomatic dance continued as I invited the delegation inside. They followed with measured steps, their eyes taking in every detail of our industrial surroundings. I noticed several of them exchange glances at the visible damage from the recent attack, hastily repaired walls and replaced panels that still showed signs of energy weapon impacts. We proceeded to the conference room, which had been transformed as much as possible into a space suitable for diplomatic reception. The usual mining charts and production schedules had been removed, replaced with displays showing the crystal formations surrounding the outpost. Someone, Rima most likely, had even managed to create a centerpiece of small crystal fragments arranged in a pattern that mimicked Lumidian energy flows. Once everyone was seated, the formal introductions began. Ambassador Talon presented each member of his delegation 2 security officers, a medical specialist, and 2 diplomatic aides. I introduced my senior crew, emphasizing their roles in both Nyria's rescue and the defense against the poacher attack. "We have reviewed the preliminary report you transmitted," Ambassador Talon said once the introductions were complete. "However, I would appreciate hearing directly from you about the circumstances of Princess Nyria's rescue and the subsequent events." I recounted the story as concisely as possible, finding Nyria trapped in the western tunnels, escaping the poachers, her integration into outpost life, and finally the attack led by Draz Krell. Throughout my explanation, I was careful to emphasize Nyria's courage and contributions, particularly how she had saved the outpost during both the extractor malfunction and the poacher assault. "And the poachers?" Ambassador Talon inquired. "You have them in custody?" "Yes, Ambassador," Dom replied. 14 captured, including Krell himself. "They're being held in our secure storage facility, converted to temporary detention. We would like to see them," the ambassador stated, "and review all evidence collected regarding their operation." Of course, I agreed. "We've prepared complete documentation including data recovered from their vessels." Throughout this exchange, Nyria had remained silent, though I noticed her watching her cousin carefully. There was clearly communication happening between them that went beyond words, subtle changes in their luminescence patterns that seemed to convey meaning. "If I may," Nyria finally spoke, her voice carrying quiet authority that immediately drew everyone's attention. "I believe it would be beneficial for the delegation to understand the full scope of what Outpost Vega accomplished during the attack. Their defense was not merely reactive but demonstrated remarkable innovation under extreme pressure." Ambassador Talon inclined his head. "Please elaborate, cousin." Nyria proceeded to explain in detail how the mining crew had repurposed their equipment into defensive systems, highlighting Rima's modifications to the shield generators that had incorporated Lumidian energy principles. She spoke with genuine admiration that clearly surprised the Lumidian delegation. "Such adaptability is unexpected," Ambassador Talon admitted, studying our crew with new interest. "Most impressive. If you'd like to see the modified systems, I'd be happy to show you," Rima offered eagerly, barely containing her scientific enthusiasm. The ambassador considered this for a moment before nodding. "Yes, I believe that would be informative. However, first we must address the matter of Princess Nyria's return. Our vessel is prepared for immediate departure once she has gathered any personal effects." The statement, delivered with such casual certainty, sent a chill through me despite its inevitability. Of course they would want to leave immediately. Of course Nyria would go with them. That had always been the expected outcome of her rescue. "So soon?" Dom asked, glancing at me with barely concealed concern. "We had hoped to formally debrief with the princess regarding the energy modifications she implemented in our extraction systems. While your technical interests are understandable," Ambassador Talon replied smoothly, "Princess Nyria has royal duties that have been neglected during her captivity. The High Council awaits her return with great anticipation." Nyria's luminescence dimmed slightly, though her expression remained composed. "Perhaps a compromise, cousin. A few hours to properly transfer my research findings to the outpost team would ensure the continuation of the efficiency improvements we've begun." The ambassador studied her for a long moment, those opalescent eyes apparently noticing more than just her outward appearance. "Very well, we shall depart in 3 hours. That should provide sufficient time for knowledge transfer and preparation." 3 hours. The finality of it struck me with unexpected force. In 3 hours, Nyria would leave Outpost Vega, would leave me, and return to her royal duties in a world I could barely imagine. "Thank you, Ambassador," I managed to say, keeping my voice professional. "We appreciate your flexibility." The meeting continued with discussions of the poacher threat and arrangements for transferring the prisoners to Lumidian custody. Throughout, I maintained my focus on the diplomatic necessities, pushing aside the growing weight in my chest. After the formal meeting concluded, I escorted Ambassador Talon and 2 of his aides to inspect the detained poachers. Dome led the rest of the delegation on a tour of our modified defense systems, with Rima enthusiastically explaining her adaptations of Nyria's energy principles. Krell remained defiant even in captivity, his mismatched eyes cold as he regarded the Lumidian ambassador through the energy barrier of his cell. "The market for Lumidian energy manipulation will only grow," he stated flatly when questioned about his operation. "If not me, others will fill the demand. The consequences for trafficking in royal Lumidian biological material are severe," Ambassador Talon replied, his voice carrying an edge I hadn't heard before. "You will have ample time to contemplate your choices." After the inspection, I guided the ambassador back toward the conference room. As we walked, he slowed his pace, allowing his aides to move ahead of us. "Team Leader Reed," he said quietly, "I would speak with you privately." I nodded, leading him to a small observation alcove off the main corridor. Through the viewport, the crystal plains stretched toward the horizon, his ship gleaming in the distance. "I wish to express my personal gratitude," he began, his formal tones softening slightly. "Not merely the diplomatic acknowledgement offered earlier, but my sincere appreciation for what you have done for Nyria." "She would have done the same for any of us," I replied, honestly. "In fact, she did, multiple times. Yes, she mentioned your connection." His choice of word carried weight, the translator device barely capturing the nuance. "It is unusual for a Lumidian to form such a rapid energy bond with a non-Lumidian." I kept my expression neutral, unsure how much Nyria had shared with her cousin. "We've been through intense situations together. That tends to accelerate trust." "Indeed." Ambassador Talon studied me with those unsettling opalescent eyes. "You should understand that Nyria's position carries significant responsibilities. Her research is vital to our people's future, and her royal lineage places certain expectations upon her." "I'm aware of her importance," I said carefully. "Are you?" he asked, his luminescence pulsing in patterns I couldn't interpret. "She is not merely a scientist or royal family member. Her energy manipulation abilities are exceptional even among our people. The research she conducts has implications for our entire civilization's relationship with crystal energy." I absorbed this information, adding it to the complex picture of Nyria I had been assembling over our days together. "Which is why the poachers targeted her specifically." "Yes, and why she cannot remain in an exposed position such as this outpost." His eyes returned to the viewport, to the ship waiting to take her away. "Her place is with her people, continuing her work under proper protection." Though his words were delivered gently, their meaning was clear. Whatever had developed between Nyria and me was temporary, a connection formed in crisis that could not survive the reality of our different worlds and responsibilities. "I understand, Ambassador," I said, the words tasting bitter despite their truth. He turned back to me, his expression softening further. "I believe you do, Team Leader Reed, which is why I trust you will make these final hours easier for her, not more difficult." With that, he inclined his head slightly and departed, leaving me alone with the view of the crystal plains and the ship that would soon take Nyria away. I found her in the research lab, carefully organizing data crystals containing her findings on extraction efficiency improvements. Her luminescence pulsed with focused energy as she worked, though it dimmed slightly when I entered. "Ambassador Talon seems impressed with our operation," I said, leaning against the doorframe. "He is not easily impressed," she replied without looking up from her work. "It is significant." I moved into the lab, closing the door behind me. For a moment we existed in charged silence, both aware of the countdown ticking away our remaining time together. "Nyria," I began, not entirely sure what I planned to say. "Please," she interrupted, finally meeting my eyes, "do not make this more difficult." I wasn't going to, I assured her, though in truth, I didn't know what I had been about to say. "I want you to know that what you've done here matters. Not just saving us from the poachers or improving our extraction methods. You've changed how we see crystal energy, how I see it." Her luminescence brightened slightly. "And you have changed how I see human adaptability. Your people's resourcefulness. I will carry these lessons back to my research." Another silence fell between us, heavy with unspoken thoughts. I moved closer, drawn by the usual current that always seemed to flow between us. "Your cousin explained some things," I finally said, "about your position, your research. I understand why you have to go back." "Do you?" she asked, softly, her luminescence pulsing with complex patterns. "Because I am not certain I do." The admission surprised me. "What do you mean?" She set down the data crystal she had been holding, her movements deliberate. My research has always been about improving energy utilization for my people. Finding ways to enhance our natural abilities, strengthen our connection to crystal formations. She gestured around the lab. Here, I discovered applications I never considered. Practical implementations that could benefit both our species. You can still pursue that research with your people, I pointed out, though each word felt like a betrayal of my own desires. In isolation, she countered. Without the practical knowledge your miners possess. Without, she hesitated, her skin darkening slightly. Without the perspective you have given me. The implication hung between us, neither willing to directly address what had been building since that moment in the cave during the storm. A connection that transcended our biological differences, that had grown stronger with each shared danger and quiet moment. What are you saying, Nyria? I asked, needing clarity even if it would make our imminent separation more painful. I am saying that I have responsibilities to my people that cannot be abandoned, she replied, carefully. But I am also saying that the work I have begun here feels unfinished. Both the research and, I prompted when she didn't continue. Instead of answering directly, she moved closer, close enough that I could feel the energy emanating from her skin. The energy bond between us. It is unusual, rare between different species. Ambassador Talon mentioned that. Did he also mention that such bonds do not form by accident? Her eyes held mine, swirling with colors I couldn't name. They require compatibility at a fundamental energy level, a resonance that should not be possible between human and Lumidian. My heart beat faster as I processed her words. What does that mean exactly? It means, she began, but was interrupted by the lab door sliding open. Rima burst in, her face flushed with excitement, clutching a tablet and what appeared to be a small prototype device. I've got it. I finally got it working. She stopped abruptly, looking between us. Oh, sorry, I didn't realize. It's fine, Rima, I said, stepping back from Nyria, though the interruption felt anything but fine. What have you got? Rima approached, practically vibrating with enthusiasm. Remember how we discussed the poachers' ability to track Lumidian energy signatures? I've been analyzing the data from the captured equipment, and I realized we could create a countermeasure. She held up the prototype. A small device with crystal components arranged in a configuration that resembled the circuit-like patterns on Nyria's skin. It generates a disruptive field that masks Lumidian energy signatures. Rima explained rapidly. It won't block them completely, but it makes them much harder to detect at a distance. I used your protection system designs, Axel, and combined them with Princess Nyria's research on energy flow manipulation. Nyria took the device, examining it with evident fascination. This is remarkable. The crystal alignment follows natural energy paths but redirects the output signature. Exactly. Rima beamed. It's just a prototype. But with refinement, it could prevent poachers from tracking Lumidians across vast distances. I watched as Nyria turned the device in her hands, her scientific mind clearly processing the implications. Suddenly, her luminescence brightened with intensity. Rima, she said, looking up with newfound purpose. This could change everything, not just for my safety, but for all Lumidians traveling through contested space. I thought so too, Rima agreed enthusiastically. But I need more time to perfect it, and with you leaving, perhaps, Nyria interrupted, her eyes meeting mine briefly. That timeline requires reconsideration. Before I could ask what she meant, she had turned toward the door. I must show this to Ambassador Talon immediately. Rima, bring your research data. Axel, please join us. Confused but intrigued, I followed as Nyria moved with renewed energy through the corridors toward the conference room, where Ambassador Talon was reviewing documentation with his aides. Cousin, Nyria announced as we entered, her voice carrying an authority I hadn't heard before. I must speak with you, regarding a matter of significant importance to our people. Ambassador Talon looked up, his expression changing from mild annoyance at the interruption to curiosity, as he noted Nyria's intense luminescence. What is this about? He asked, dismissing his aides with a gesture. Nyria placed Rima's prototype on the table before him. A solution to the poacher tracking problem, and potentially much more. For the next 20 minutes, Nyria and Rima explained the device's function and potential applications. I watched Ambassador Talon's expression change from skepticism to genuine interest as he examined the prototype and the accompanying data. "This is preliminary work," he observed. "But the principles appear sound." "More than sound," Nyria insisted. "Revolutionary. But it requires further development. Development that would benefit from continued collaboration between Lumidian energy science and human mining expertise." I began to understand where she was heading, and my pulse quickened. "What are you proposing, cousin?" Ambassador Talon asked, though his tone suggested he already suspected her intent. "A joint research initiative," Nyria stated firmly, "based here at Outpost Vega, combining Lumidian crystal energy science with human practical extraction techniques." The ambassador's luminescence pulsed with surprise. "Here, at a human mining outpost? That is unprecedented." "As is this technology," Nyria countered, gesturing to the prototype. "Ambassador, consider the implications. Not just protection from poachers, but improved energy efficiency for both our peoples. Harmonized extraction methods that respect crystal formations while increasing yield. The potential benefits far outweigh the unconventional nature of the arrangement." Ambassador Talon studied her for a long moment, his opalescent eyes unreadable. "And you wish to lead this initiative?" "I do," she confirmed without hesitation. "With a human counterpart, who understands both the technical requirements and the importance of the work." Her eyes flickered briefly to me, and I felt a surge of hope that I immediately tried to temper. This was about scientific collaboration, not personal connection. I needed to remember that. "The High Council will require significant assurances," Ambassador Talon said after consideration. "Security protocols, diplomatic arrangements, resource allocation, all manageable," Nyria replied confidently, "and worth the effort for what we stand to gain." The discussion continued for over an hour, evolving from concept to concrete planning as Ambassador Talon moved from skepticism to tentative support. Rima provided technical details while I addressed security concerns and resource requirements. Throughout, Nyria presented her case with passionate intelligence that clearly impressed her cousin. "Very well," Ambassador Talon finally said, his luminescence pulsing with what appeared to be reluctant acceptance. "I will present this proposal to the High Council with my recommendation for approval. However," he added, giving Nyria a stern look, "you understand that this arrangement comes with conditions." "I expected nothing less," she replied, calmly. "You will maintain regular communication with the Council. Lumidian security personnel will be stationed here, and you will share leadership of this initiative with a human counterpart approved by both our governments." His eyes turned to me, evaluating. "Team Leader Reed has demonstrated both competence and commitment to your safety. If he is willing, the Council would likely find him acceptable for this role." The formal offer caught me off guard, despite the direction of the conversation. "I would be honored, Ambassador," I managed to say, my mind racing with implications. "Though I would need my company's approval for such an arrangement. I anticipate that can be negotiated," Ambassador Talon replied with surprising confidence. "The efficiency improvements Princess Nyria has already implemented should provide sufficient economic incentive for your corporate leaders." As the meeting concluded and arrangements were made to formalize the proposal, I found myself struggling to process what had just happened. The countdown to Nyria's departure had been replaced by plans for an ongoing collaboration, one that would keep her at Outpost Vega indefinitely. Rima departed with Ambassador Talon to provide a more detailed technical briefing, leaving Nyria and me alone in the conference room. For a moment neither of us spoke, the reality of this unexpected development settling between us. "That was impressive diplomacy," I finally said. A small smile played across her face. "Practical application of royal training. Was this your plan all along?" I asked, curious about the sudden change from resignation to determined action. "No," she admitted. "Rima's prototype provided the catalyst, but the desire," her luminescence pulsed with soft waves. "The desire to find a way to stay has been growing since the cave. The simple honesty of her admission broke through my careful restraint. I moved closer, drawn by the current that always seemed to flow between us. "We should probably discuss the practical aspects of this arrangement," I said, though practicality was the furthest thing from my mind at that moment. "Yes," she agreed, her luminescence brightening as I approached. "Many details to consider. Resource allocation, security protocols, resource priorities." With each exchange, the distance between us diminished until we stood mere inches apart, the air vibrating with unspoken tension. "Perhaps," I suggested quietly, "we should continue this discussion somewhere more private." Nyria's skin pulsed with waves of light that matched the rapid beating of my heart. "The observation deck," she suggested. "Few people at this hour." We made our way through the corridors in charged silence, hyper-aware of each other's presence. The observation deck was indeed empty, the vast crystal plains visible through the panoramic viewport. Crystallis Moon's perpetual twilight cast everything in soft blue light, complemented by the natural glow of Nyria's luminescence. As the door closed behind us, the pretense of professional discussion evaporated. We turned to each other, drawn by the energy that had been building between us since that first moment in the western tunnels. "This arrangement," I began, needing to be certain, "the resource initiative, is it what you truly want, or just a solution to an impossible situation?" "Both," she answered honestly. "The resource is vital, the collaboration valuable, but also," her luminescence brightened as she stepped closer, "also a path to what we both want but could not speak." "And what is that, exactly?" I asked, my voice low. Instead of answering with words, Nyria reached out, her slender fingers tracing the line of my jaw with exquisite gentleness. The contact sent waves of warmth through my skin, more focused and intense than any previous touch. "Energy seeks balance," she murmured, her eyes holding mine. "Finds paths between different states, creates connections where none existed before." I covered her hand with mine, holding it against my face. "Is that what's happening between us? Some kind of energy equalization?" A smile played across her face, scientific explanation for something deeper, something rare. The last of my hesitation dissolved. I leaned forward, closing the final distance between us. Our lips met gently at first, then with growing intensity as the energy current between us strengthened, flowing freely from her skin to mine and back again. Nyria's luminescence flared brilliantly, casting dancing patterns of light across the observation deck. The circuit-like markings on her skin pulsed with rhythmic waves that seemed to match my heartbeat. As we separated slightly, her eyes met mine, swirling with colors I'd never seen before. "That was," I began, searching for words. "Energy resonance," she supplied, her voice soft with wonder. "Perfect harmony." I smiled, drawing her closer. "I was going to say incredible, but your explanation works too." We stood together at the viewport, her body fitting perfectly against mine as we looked out at the crystal plains. The Lumidian ship gleamed in the distance, no longer a symbol of imminent separation but a connection to a future neither of us had anticipated. "What happens now?" I asked, my arm around her waist, feeling the gentle pulse of energy through her skin. "Many challenges," she acknowledged. "Different worlds, different responsibilities. Still complicated." "Very complicated," I agreed, echoing our conversation in the cave. "But I'm starting to think some complications are worth facing," she finished, looking up at me with a smile that outshone the crystal formations stretching to the horizon. As we stood together on the observation deck, bathed in the combined light of Crystallis Moon's twilight and Nyria's radiant luminescence, I realized how far we had come from that first desperate meeting in the western tunnels, from rescuer and refugee to reluctant allies, then to friends and colleagues, and now to something deeper, partners in a venture that would bridge our worlds in ways neither of us could have imagined.